Hello, and thank you for watching Andisha TV. The probability of accessing nuclear weapons by Iran has been a widely debated international issue. The primary focus of discussion has been on what Israel and the United States should do as a result. The most prominent ideas have been negotiating with the Iranian government and economic and political isolation, which could lead to a change in regime in Iran. And a last resort would be a military attack on the nuclear installations in Iran. In September 2012, Iranian philanthropist and scientist Dr Semnani published a study by the Hickensley Institute of Politics at the University of Utah and Omid for Iran, entitled The Ayatollah's Nuclear Gamble. The subtitle, The Human Cost of Military Strikes Against Iran's Nuclear Facilities. Throughout his career, Mr. Semnani has been a passionate supporter of humanitarian causes around the world. In 1993, he established the Semnani Family Foundation and has directed its global efforts to assist those in need as a result of natural and man-made disasters. Mr. Semnani's contributions include a wide range of charitable, medical, and civic projects in Utah and assistance for those suffering from hunger, poverty, and ravages of storms from wars around the world. The 62-page study that Semnani published includes the results of the catastrophic results of a military attack on the bases in Iran. The results would cause deaths and have catastrophic effects on the environment, economy, and the Iranian people. Today, we are welcoming Mr. Semnani to discuss his study. Thank you for joining me today, Mr. Semnani.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to visit with you. I'm very happy that for once somebody is speaking English and pronouncing my name right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good.
Mr. Semnani, there have been so many articles published on the topic of what to do about Iranian's nuclear buildup. What was your objective in publishing this article, and what makes it different from the others that have already been published?
Well, I certainly welcome all the information that has been generated in support of preventing a war in Iran. Of course, our study is somewhat different. It's somewhat unique because it really talks about the human dimension, something that has been completely overlooked in any kind of calculus or conversation regarding Iran's nuclear issue. And as we all know, any kind of military attack will result into somewhat of a war, and even before the war takes place, those attacks, as a result of destruction, it would kill hundreds, not even thousands or even tens of thousands of people, and with a long-term effect on the environment, it would be catastrophic for Iranian people. And we felt, or I felt to start with, and then other people that they worked with me, a number of wonderful scientists and writers who worked with me to make sure that this information is being really provided to everybody, not only in the United States, but more importantly in Iran, and to the decision makers in Iran.
Right, okay. And Dr. Semnani, as we know, your work has been discussed and debated globally. What was the reaction from the media when you published this initially?
Yeah, very good question, very good question. In reality, when we released the paper in September of 2012, this paper was received very well all over the world, from the United States, France, Germany, and articles outside of Iran, as well as even in Iran, there was a reaction, and there was positive reviews were done, both in terms of scientific as well as humanitarian, and many people supported it. The articles were in Time magazine, as well as BBC, Voice of America, a number of other places, and a few of the publications in France as well as Germany, as I mentioned. So there has been a lot of positive reaction to it, and I think a lot of people are taking notice of it. It has also been discussed in Israel, and which is very important, major player in the deal. So it has been very well received.
Okay, great. The main focus of your study, as I understand, Doctor, was that it's mainly based on the 4 nuclear installations in Esfahan, Natanz, Arak, and Bushehr. You included the nuclear power plant in Bushehr as a possible but unlikely target. A senior research fellow at the National Institute of Security Studies, Ebrahim Askulay, published a response essay entitled "Civilian Casualties of a Military Strike in Iran." In his article, he argued that it's not a possibility because no one in his right mind would consider striking an operating nuclear power reactor. So, Doctor, my question is, what makes you think there's a possibility of Bushehr as a target?
Bushehr is a unique operation, as you pointed out correctly. The discussion regarding Bushehr as why it could be a target is not really limited to our paper. It had been mentioned earlier, and in fact, CSIS, Center for Strategic and International Study, a think tank in Washington, had mentioned that. And they although specifically they didn't say there would be an attack, but they say if there was an attack, there would be a huge consequence in terms of both environmental as well as human casualties. Thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, have been mentioned. Right. So it's not really something that we are the only one who has made a reference. But it's important to understand Bushehr. Bushehr has many dimensions. And Bushehr, in reality, in as much as it's a nuclear power plant, but it is a very unique nuclear power plant because of the deficiency and lack of transparency in terms of building of this facility and ensuring the necessary quality assurance and quality control in construction, or even beyond earlier than that, in design as well as construction, and then in operation. Especially due to the fact is a process by which 3 different technology of German, Iranian, and Russian has been married together, and you've got a unique operation that is technologically very challenging. And this is the admission of the Russian director, who said himself that no power plant has been built like this, and it has many technical challenges. So there is not only the issue of attacks, but also operationally, this is an issue that we have raised, and we have also pointed out to Iranian government through a letter that we wrote on 4th of January to New York Times, which it got published, and government of Iran through its ambassador to United Nations responded, and they've agreed to include the operation of this facility and signed with the 1994 convention to ensure that the operation is properly inspected by IAEA to ensure the correct operation.
Okay, thank you for that answer.
Sorry, it's too long, but I had to explain that.
An attack on the Bushehr nuclear power plant would not only result, as you have said, in a catastrophic casualty rate, but the environment would be irreversibly contaminated by the radiation, which would be released on impact. Mr. Semnani, can you further explain the long-term effects of an attack on the Bushehr or any other nuclear power plant in Iran?
Yes, it's a nuclear power plant the size that it is. It's almost 1,000 megawatt operation, and it's very similar to the one in Chernobyl in size. And both these reactors were constructed by Russians, of course. And in Chernobyl, after the accident, and similarly in Bushehr, if there is an attack or an accident, you would have the release of many different radionuclides and isotopes that you're talking about, strontium-90, cesium-137. These are all isotopes that they could potentially harm people, not only in short term, but long term. They can get in the environment, and they would have a catastrophic effect and problems. Of course, an attack also, it would kill the people who are there, unfortunately, the engineers, the scientists, and people who work there, from plumber to security people. support staff. This is an issue that needs to be addressed not only from a military attack, but also from safety operation that needs to be addressed. And this is what we try to highlight in this book as well. It is important to ensure that the government of Iran gets involved and allows IAEA for inspection and proper controls.
Right, okay. Thank you. I understand that you argued, part of your argument in your essay was that a long-term solution would be a regime change in Iran, so into a democratic government. You also stated that the majority of the blame should be placed on Ayatollah Khamenei and his regime for leading the Iranian people down the path of potential conflict with Israel and the United States. In his rebuttal, Askulai stated that a regime change might not occur, and even if it does, it would be so delayed that it could allow the current regime to decide to use their nuclear weapons. Doctor, do you believe that this is a possibility, or do you think that the current regime could be changing right now?
I cannot predict if the current regime is changing for certain, but I'm happy that you asked the question of the whole idea and the philosophy of why the nuclear issue is such a big problem in Iran. It's a big problem because the Iranian government has chosen to make it a problem, unfortunately. It has created a security issue around the nuclear program of Iran, which, if they are really truthful about their presentation that the Iran nuclear program is not a military one, then the issue becomes, if it's not a military one, why don't we have the necessary transparency? And why don't we have the involvement of IAEA and the other regulatory agencies to be able to ensure that they have the necessary information, so there is no worries about nuclear dimension of, military dimension of Iran's program. That is what's important, and that's what's missing. And unfortunately, the Iranian government, because of their behavior and statements they've made, and causing a security issue that is around this program, has lost a lot of credibility. And no matter what they say, nobody believes them anymore. And this has been a kind of a slippery slope type of situation for them that continuously Iran government has caused for themselves. And even as early as today, there was an article that I believe it was in Financial Times, that again, they look at Iranian program, their nuclear program, as a security program that should be saved and should be hidden practically from public. And that's what's wrong. If public is involved and the issues are clearly stated, and foreign countries and foreign agencies, including the agency, international agency, are allowed to look at this and inspect them, there is no problem. In absence of that, we're going to continue to have problems, and unfortunately, the risk of war would continue to be there.
Right, that makes sense. As you know, an article was recently published by the Jerusalem Post by Yaakov Lapin, reiterating the arguments that Askulai made in his response essay. His key point was that if a nuclear base were to be attacked, the residue from the impact would act like a filter for the toxic gases, preventing them from being released into the atmosphere. Do you believe that this is a credible argument? Do you think this is the case, a possible case in this scenario?
Well, as you probably have heard, in scientific community, we're allowed to, everybody is entitled to their own opinion, but they're not entitled to their own facts. This is important. The fact remains that really nobody understands and knows. They will never know. Nobody knows the order of the battle. What the order of the battle means is the sequence and the purposes and strategic intention as to why a certain attack will take place. And in absence of that information, you really don't know how many bombs are going to be thrown, when it's going to be thrown, how many people are going to be killed, what kind of infrastructure damage is going to be there, and all of those things nobody knows. Just simply saying that we think an attack is okay, simply because if we throw a bomb and some of that material may be entrapped in the rubble. That is not a good argument. That's not justifying and ignoring the human casualty and the deaths of thousands of people just simply because some of the gas would get entrapped. In fact, the article was wrong on another issue as well, that they claimed that we had said, they said it wrongly. We never said that, but they say we had said that up to 70,000 people would be a casualty as a result of a nuclear fallout. We never said that. We simply said between 5 to 70,000 people will be casualty if the bombs are thrown and the uranium hexafluoride is actually airborne. And at that point, at different percentages, we said 1%, 5, 10, 20, and 50%, depending on how much of this material is released, these are the type of casualties we are going to get as a result of the chemical toxic material, not nuclear fallout. Of course, nuclear fallout has its own implications and own problems that very seriously would have, all kind of problem of birth defects and other things that's going to cancer. But we never said that. So the article really is very light, in my opinion. It's very poorly prepared and written. And we've written a letter to that effect to Jerusalem Post and pointing out their deficiency. And I wish they had called us because we could have explained all of these things in advance to make sure that they write the correct and appropriate article. But they didn't. They just took a shot at it and they blew it.
Right. Yes, I was going to ask you what your general view of the article by the Jerusalem Post is, but you gave us a little bit of that already. I do remember, I read your letter to the editor that you wrote back to them, and I saw that you caught that mistake that they made with the 70,000 casualties, but you did provide a range of casualties, and it wasn't just that specific amount, so I understand. To conclude today, do you have any suggestions for Iranians and non-Iranians around the world to maybe better educate themselves on this topic or understand or help in any way? Do you have any advice?
Well, to start with, I know there are a lot of Iranians in Iran suffering from the economic devastation that's been caused because of the sanctions and so on. And everybody, including the candidates for presidency that they're now running and they're talking, they all admit to it. Iran is losing over $5 billion with the admission of their own parliament every month because of not being able to sell the oil that they want to sell. And of course, the economy has been devastated. The rial has dropped by 2/3. These are nothing new, I'm telling you. But to answer your good question regarding what it is that I would recommend, I would suggest the Iranian people who really care about this situation, they should start trying to inform themselves. We have made our report as a part of this information campaign to help people to understand what the issues are, what the levels of the dangers, what the boundaries, and where the brackets are. But more importantly, I think the people outside of Iran, they also need to educate themselves. And I invite every one of them to very actively read this information, but also actively get involved in trying to educate the decision makers in their own respective countries, may it be in Europe, may it be in Japan, may it be in Australia, United States, Canada, Mexico, wherever they are. They get involved and start writing letters and talking to the leaders as to highlighting that there is a very serious issue here that's a human dimension and the casualties that will be caused in Iran. Unfortunately, the people that are a victim, we are victimizing them again. And this is where the problem really lies. Those people, the civilians, they really had nothing to do with it because their government has hidden the program from them. Now they will have to pay a heavier price with their lives. That's what's wrong. Myself as a humanitarian is really disturbed by that. And any government, United States, Israel, anybody else who minimizes that risk, I think they are being unfair to Iranian people and human race, because casualties cannot just simply be ignored as collateral damage. That is wrong, has been wrong, and will be wrong to do that. And anybody, especially the young generation of Iranians, they should get involved. If they love Iran, if they love their heritage, they should participate in this campaign and do whatever they can by minimizing this possibility. And we are willing to help. If they want information, they can go to our site, which is nucleargamble.org. We'd be happy to assist them, to give them all the information we can, and they should do what they can as well.
Thank you, Dr. Semnani. I understand you gave that website. Is your article available on that website, or is it, how will people be able to access it if they're interested in reading more?
First of all, the article is completely, actually is presented in different sections, and the word is not missing. When you have that, you have the full report. You have it also in Persian. If their parents want to read it, don't understand English as well, they can read it in Persian as well. So that's available. So they can read it, educate themselves, and in Iran, which is just as important, I don't know if this conversation will help, but they should also participate and try to get that, shared with other people, as I've said in the past interviews. My hope is if they learn, then ask us any question we can have for explanation, for clarification. We'd be happy to help, and we can give them information, who to contact, when to contact, and that would be really helpful.
Okay, great. Do you have any final things to say, any messages for the international community that you haven't already stated? Any final words?
My final word, as I mentioned before, is the destruction of the facility in Iran is not only destroying a given industrial complex, it is killing a lot of people who work there. Thousands of people will die immediately. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of other people, they will be exposed to chemical, toxic reagents, as well as radioactive material. And this would be a human catastrophe, and nobody should allow such a thing to happen.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for your time today. Again, if you'd like to read more about Mr. Semnani's work, it is titled The Ayatollah's Nuclear Gamble, with the subtitle The Human Cost of Military Strikes Against Iran's Nuclear Facilities. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure meeting.
Thank you.